Okay, so we'll begin the webinar now. Welcome to this Legal Aid New South Wales webinar, which forms part of our Law for Community Worker webinar series. Claire from Anti-Discrimination New South Wales is your presenter today, and we'll talk to you about disability rights and disability discrimination. My name is Bridget Barker. I'm from Legal Aid's Community Legal Education branch. Before I hand over to Claire, I firstly would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on whose land we are broadcasting from today. For me, that is the land of the Widjabul-Waible people of the Bundjalung Nation. I extend my respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining the webinar today or viewing the recording of the webinar. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Claire, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you, Legal Aid, for allowing me this opportunity to come and speak to you today. In beginning, I would also like to do an acknowledgement of country and to say today I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and pay my respects to all elders past and present and to the children of today who are the elders of our future. Next slide, thank you. So just an introduction, my name is Claire Williams and I'm an Assistant Community Engagement Officer and at Anti-Discrimination New South Wales, and I've been working with AD New South Wales for 16 years, so quite some time. My colleague Morlai was going to be with us today, but unfortunately can't be here, but at the end of the presentation, I'll leave both of our contact details. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. And just to let our audience know, we're going to run a number of polls during the webinar today, and I'm just going to launch the first one of those now. It will come up on your screen and you can participate in the poll by clicking on your screen to choose the answer that's most appropriate for you. Thanks, everybody. I'll just close off the poll now and share the results. Okay, so the poll question, and I'm sorry, I should have read that out for people. Have you helped a client with a disability discrimination complaint before? So Claire, it looks like there's 81% of people who haven't and 19% responded yes.
Great. So hopefully today we'll be giving you a great deal of information so you'll be able to refer your clients to our service or assist them to other agencies. So next slide, thanks. Okay, so today we're just going to have a look at a bit of a background about the Anti-Discrimination Act. And we're going to have a look at disability discrimination, what it is, and break it down and have a look at the definition and maybe some case studies as well. Most importantly, you're going to go away with some information about how to lodge a complaint with our service and how our conciliation process works in terms of resolving complaints. And at the end, we're going to have a bit of a question and answer session. Some people have provided some questions before the session, and hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions. And anything you put in the chat box will be sent to me, and we will be able to we'll answer those questions later on. So first of all, what does Anti-Discrimination New South Wales do? Well, we have an inquiry service which is available Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and you are able to ring that inquiry service, and I'll provide those numbers for you at the end of the presentation. So you can ring our service and ask questions and get some information about how Anti-Discrimination New South Wales works. We resolve complaints by using conciliation, and I'll explain how that works in a minute. We raise awareness about discrimination and its impacts on community members and communities. And we manage applications and exemptions for the Act. And we also advise the government about discrimination issues. Next slide, thanks. So what is discrimination under the Anti-Discrimination Act? Discrimination is treating someone unfairly because of a characteristic they have or they're assumed to have that is protected by New South Wales law. And I'll break that down a bit for you in terms of disability discrimination. So there's lots of different grounds of discrimination, and grounds is a legal term which just means types of discrimination. So here's a list of all the things that we cover under the grounds of discrimination under the New South Wales Anti-Discrimination Act. You can see there race, disability, homosexuality, transgender status, carer's responsibility, age, marital or domestic status, and sex discrimination, including sexual harassment, pregnancy and breastfeeding discrimination. Okay, so in terms of the definition of disability under the Anti-Discrimination Act, we cover a loss of bodily or mental functions, physical disfigurement, illnesses and diseases, including psychological issues. So it's quite broad. And there are two types of disability discrimination under the Anti-Discrimination Act. So there's direct discrimination, when someone's treating you less favourably from someone who does not have a disability in the same circumstances. But there's also indirect discrimination, where someone's unable to comply with a requirement that applies to everyone because of their disability, and the requirement is not reasonable in the circumstances.
Thanks, Claire. We'll just run our second poll now. So this question is, have you ever referred a client to Anti-Discrimination New South Wales? And everyone's answered that one very fairly quickly. Just wait a couple of more seconds for people to have an opportunity to answer. Okay, I've closed that off. So it looks like 85% have not and 15% have.
Wow. So hopefully this information will equip you with the ability to be able to refer clients to our service. I noted in the beginning that some people presenting are interstate. So just to explain, every state has its own state agency that can deal with complaints of discrimination, and there's also the federal agency, the Australian Human Rights Commission. So if you're listening from interstate, you'll have a state discrimination agency that you can refer your clients to, and there's also the Australian Human Rights Commission. Next slide, thanks. So what happens if the complaint isn't resolved? So if a complaint isn't resolved with us, and I'll explain in general the complaint process, but if the complainant may request to refer the complaint to NCAT, which is a tribunal, even if the complaint has been declined by our service, and the complaint can be withdrawn at any time without penalty. So throughout the process, as soon as you've lodged a complaint with our service, you can withdraw that at any time, and if it's not resolved with us, it can go to the tribunal. Next slide, thank you.
Okay. Yes, sorry, Claire. I thought we had another poll now. I'll just move on first.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so where is discrimination against the law? So what areas of public life does discrimination cover in terms of our Act, the Anti-Discrimination Act? So employment, so at work, when you're getting a job or when you're trying to get a job. In goods and services, so in shops, banks, using government services, cafes, hospitals, etc. Public education, so public schools, TAFE, New South Wales, universities, etc. Accommodation, so perhaps when you're renting a house or a flat or attempting to rent a house or a flat. Registered clubs, which are clubs and pubs that sell alcohol and or have gambling machines as well. So discrimination law covers your public life.
Okay, we'll run that next poll now. Where do your clients experience discrimination? Okay, I'll close that off now. Thanks, everybody. So it looks like an interesting mix. 61% of people experience it at work or getting a job, 17% using goods and services, 17% in education, 4% in or seeking accommodation. And from this audience, it doesn't look like anyone as a client or themselves have experienced it in pubs and clubs.
So that probably reflects what we receive as complaints. So we obviously do receive a number of complaints from people with disabilities about their experience, particularly probably the highest amount would be in employment. So that would reflect the statistics in terms of the discrimination complaints that our organisation receives. Next slide, thank you. So here's a case study about disability discrimination in education. Obviously, in this case, our complaints are confidential, so the names have been changed, and obviously the photo is just a stock photo. So Emil is a school-aged boy and was diagnosed with ADHD. His paediatrician advised his parents that he shouldn't be medicated with Ritalin, and he attends before and after school care. The centre manager gave him a letter for his parents that banned him from attending before and after school care while he's unmedicated. Emil's father lodged a complaint on his behalf to our agency against the provider of before and after school care, and Emil's father stated that the provider discriminated against his son on the grounds of disability when he was given this letter. So AD New South Wales conducted a conciliation, and I'll explain our process, but a conciliation conference by telephone between both the parties, and a number of actions were agreed to, including Emil's return to the centre, an acknowledgement from the centre that banning him was wrong, and an agreed process for future communication, implementation of an agreed behaviour plan, reimbursement of out-of-pocket expenses related to the period of the ban, and a credit for fees for future use of the period of the ban. So that case was resolved. So what I just showed you was a discrimination case example, but what is not discrimination under the Anti-Discrimination Act? So not all unfair treatment is disability discrimination. The treatment must have happened because of the person's disability. So here's an example of something, again, the name has been changed and there's a stock photo that's been used. But Patrick is hearing impaired and he regularly borrows books from his local library. His lending privileges were suspended because he failed to return books and pay his library fines. And he said that this is because of his disability. However, there's no reason to believe that people who are hearing impaired are less able to return their books on time and pay their fines than people who are not. So where is disability discrimination is not unlawful? So there are certain areas where our Act doesn't cover. So the provision of education by private institutions. So private institutions are not covered under the Anti-Discrimination Act. Employment in a private educational institution. and in employment in organisations that have less than 6 employees. Again, I'm explaining to you today what the Anti-Discrimination Act covers, and obviously all our staff did not put together the Act. So if you do have issues about what is and what is not covered, you're best to talk to your state government member, parliamentarian about if you have concerns about what's covered or what's not covered. Workplace adjustments. So it's important to mention this because employments with a disability, including mental health conditions, may require workplace adjustments to perform and thrive in their work role. So a workplace adjustment is a change to a work process, a procedure, or an environment that allows a person with a disability to perform to the best of their ability, work productively, work in a safe environment, feel included in the workplace, and increase their engagement and motivation to improve performance. The most important point here, I think, is most work adjustments are simple and easy to arrange. And I think we have been doing some work with employers, and sometimes employers might be afraid that these are very large, but often they can be simple, while others may require more time to put in place, but they may be simple, like, for example, adjusting a computer screen, providing a different chair, changing the lighting, instances such as that. So workplaces should consider possible options for adjustments for staff with a disability to perform their role. So here's a case study of disability discrimination in employment. Again, the name has been changed and the photo is a stock photo. So Jane was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and she informed her employer of the diagnosis and asked them to make some adjustments to minimise her exposure to noise in the main open plan workplace. And her employer agreed to purchase noise cancelling headphones and offered her exclusive use of some offices on certain days, but Jane still felt that they could have done more to accommodate her, so she lodged a complaint with our servers. The complaint went to conciliation, and without agreeing that the organisation had discriminated against Jane, the employer agreed to pay her $7,000 in damages to resolve the matter. So whilst we're talking about disability discrimination, just wanted to mention masks and vaccinations. So if you are a person with a disability and believe you've been treated unfairly because you can't wear a mask or are unable to get a vaccination, you may be able to make a complaint of disability discrimination. The law is complex on this matter, and there are public health exceptions in the Anti-Discrimination Act that may apply. We've received a number of phone calls on our inquiry service regarding this. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call us, and I'll give you those details at the end of the presentation. But as part of the complaint process, we'll ask for the details of your disability and for information on how your disability prevents you from wearing a mask or getting vaccinated. And the rules on mask wearing and vaccinations are available from the New South Wales Health website. Privacy questions should be directed to the Information and Privacy Commission. And I think
thanks, Claire. Yeah, that's right. We've got another poll, so I'll just launch that now. So the question is, have your clients experienced more discrimination since the COVID-19 restrictions began? Just while people are completing that, I didn't mention at the beginning, some of you may have noticed that we have included a handout, and you can access that in your control panel today. There's a grey line that says handout, and if you go to that, there's a PDF that you can download during the webinar, but we will also send it by email to you following the webinar. I'll close that off now and share the results. So it looks like 77% of people have said yes, they have clients or they themselves have experienced more discrimination since the COVID restrictions began, and 23% said no.
Yeah, and again, that would reflect what we've been hearing from community members as well. Yeah, and it's of great concern, yeah. Next slide, thank you. We'll just go to the next slide, thanks. Okay, so I just want to explain about lodging a complaint with Anti-Discrimination New South Wales. So I've been talking about the conciliation process, and I've mentioned that a couple of times. So I just want to explain to you step by step about how you would make a formal complaint to Anti-Discrimination New South Wales. You may have already talked to our inquiry service, and then you decide you would like to make a formal complaint. So a complaint needs to be made in writing. In saying that, I'll explain, you can access, you can send us an email or fill in our online complaint on our website. Really important to say, we're a free service. Most people are not aware of that. You don't need a solicitor to make a complaint to our service. And you can lodge a complaint in any language. So we use the TIS service, translation service, and it's at our organisation's cost. And we provide interpreters at our cost, and you can lodge a complaint in your own language. And we can do a conciliation conference with you speaking your own language. It's really important to say, when you ring up our inquiry line, our inquiry officers are here to help and assist you, but we are neutral in terms of resolving your complaint. Inquiries, when you ring up the telephone line, are anonymous, but when you decide to make a formal complaint, that can't be anonymous. We need to be fair, and we're neutral, and we need to ask the other party about what has occurred. So complaints need to contain the following information. So in terms of disability discrimination, we need to know what your disability is if you're complaining to us, who treated you less favourably, and the dates or times, as much information as you can give us in terms of when the discrimination began and finished. So in lodging a complaint with us, just imagine that we don't know you, we don't know what's happened. So if you can provide as much information as you can. Were there witnesses? You don't necessarily have to have had witnesses, but as much information as you can with regard to what has occurred. So we have a window of 12 months. A complaint can be declined if it happened more than 12 months ago, but there's discretion with this. So for example, if you had not heard of our service before, or you've been too stressed and anxious to make a complaint, let us know why it's taken you more than 12 months to make a complaint, and this will be looked at when you lodge a complaint with us. So the AD New South Wales investigation process. So once you've lodged a complaint to us, we send a copy of the complaint to the respondent, which the other party, asking for a written response. We send a copy of what's occurred, what you've let us know has occurred, and we ask for a written response. The response is then sent to the complainant for comment. We decide whether to try and help the parties to resolve the complaint by conciliation. And a conciliation doesn't always happen because the complaint may be declined if it doesn't fit under our grounds and areas, for example. But a conciliation, our conciliations used to be face-to-face before COVID. Our conciliations are now online, and we use telephone shuttling, and we also use MS Teams to resolve our complaints via conciliation. So what is conciliation? So conciliation is a meeting between the parties, both parties, facilitated by a conciliation officer from our organisation. So conciliation is used to help both parties resolve the complaints. Again, remember I said that as an organisation, our conciliators remain neutral. Complaints can be resolved even when parties do not agree on what happened and why. And conciliation may be a conciliation conference in person, well, it was before COVID, or online using Microsoft Teams, or shuttle negotiations by phone and email. At a conciliation conference, I suppose it's one thing to remember. It's important to remember that if you've been bullied at work, for example, it's not going to be necessarily yourself and the bully. It's going to be a conciliation conference would involve a higher level of management or HR. So each party gets to have their say, Parties may request to have legal representatives, advocates, and or support people at the conference. It's really important to say that as a community engagement officer, I recommend to community members to have a support person at the conciliation conference and to remember that they're entitled to that. There will be joint sessions and private sessions as well. So it's not just yourself and the other party for the whole process. You'll have joint individual sessions with the conciliator to talk about how you would like it resolved, as well as joint sessions with the other party you're complaining about. So what are some of the outcomes of conciliation? What are some of the things that people may ask for? And this is something to think about before you actually make a complaint with our service. So is an apology or a statement of regret, is that something that you feel is important? It may be a job reinstatement, a transfer or a promotion. It may be financial compensation, for example, for lost wages, hurt, or anxiety. Access to a previously denied opportunity or service, workplace education and staff training, or a change in policy. It may be a number of those things, or simply one of those things, or something else that is important to you. So in terms of making a complaint to our service, please think of what outcome you would like. So how you would like the complaint resolved if you're making a complaint, because again, we're neutral and you decide what you would like. It's important to say the other party that you're complaining about has to agree to it, what outcome you would like. And that's what the conciliation process is for. So here's another case study in goods and services. And it's important again to say that the name has been changed and the stock photo has been used. So Zhang is blind and his local pedestrian crossing was altered by the council, making it more difficult for him to navigate. So he approached the council and requested some modifications. And when the council did not respond, he complained to Anti-Discrimination New South Wales that he was being discriminated against because of his disability. So Anti-Discrimination New South Wales helped the parties, this is during conciliation, to resolve the matter. Without admitting any liability, the council undertook works to fix the handrail at the crossing and add extra tactile ground markers at the start of the crossing. And these modifications have made the crossing safer to use for blind pedestrians like Zhang. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so it's just important to say that we have a fantastic new website, and if you just put in Anti-Discrimination New South Wales, that should come up. And you can see that the most important thing for clients is that we're actually producing videos that haven't been put online yet, but they're in 5 key community languages. We have an Australian video that you can access. We have a video about how our complaint process works. It's really easy when you navigate the website, where you can see that the first button there says lodge a complaint. So that's really easy if you're making a complaint to our service, that there'll be information when you tap that button about lodging a complaint. And as I mentioned, you can actually use our web form to lodge a complaint and lodge it online, or you might choose to send us a separate email. If you need assistance in terms of making a complaint, we can refer you to like a disability legal service or somebody who can assist you in typing up or writing your complaint. So the most important things is to give you numbers of our inquiry service. So please do call our inquiry service if you have any inquiries about conciliation or discrimination. Our complaints number is 92685544, and the toll-free number is 1800-670-812. So those numbers, as I mentioned, Monday to Friday. Due to COVID, it's a recorded service. So if you leave your details Monday to Friday, somebody should get back to you within that day. Our toll-free number is 1800-670-812. Important to just reiterate that. We also use the TIS service, as I mentioned. So I would suggest that you ring if you do require the translation service. You can ring them and let them know to ring our inquiry service and to set up a meeting. You can email us. There's with regard to your complaints, that's an email there. And if you have any further questions or you would like a similar information session or a webinar about discrimination or disability discrimination, I've left my email. And as was mentioned before by Bridget, you will definitely get a PDF of the session. And with all these details, so you'll have the PDF of the PowerPoint, so you'll be able to refer to this. And there is our anti-discrimination website details as well. Please remember you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn. And we also, if you go on our website, we have a fantastic monthly newsletter called Equal Time, which features information about discrimination and has case examples, and is a really good resource as well. If you have a look online on our website, you can put your name down to receive that monthly. So I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity. We're going to do a poll after this, and we're going to answer some questions that have been sent with regard to disability discrimination.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for that great presentation. I'll just launch this last poll, and rest assured, everybody, we've got plenty of time to answer your questions, and I can see there have been questions coming through during Claire's presentation. I'll just launch this final poll now. Do you feel more able to assist your clients after today's presentation? Okay, so I'll share those results. 96% of people have said yes and 4% have said no. So it may be that they have questions that we need to answer, and we'll move to answering people's questions now. Won't be a minute. Okay, so Claire, some questions that came in prior to the webinar. People with a disability have a right to ask for personal adjustments. How much responsibility do we have to perform job duties?
That's a great question. Just to let you know that the Anti-Discrimination Act, which was written in 1977, doesn't refer to personal responsibility in the Act. So an employee needs to be able, in employment and in working in a job, an employee needs to be able to perform the inherent requirements of the job, but their employer should consider reasonable adjustments. We discussed reasonable adjustments, such as specialised equipment or flexible working practices. And we suggest that if you do have an issue, if you're not clear about this, that you do contact our inquiry service, and that was the 1-800 number I mentioned and the 9268 5544 if you have a question or an inquiry about making a complaint.
Thank you, Claire. The next question that we have is, why don't all train stations have accessibility for those with mobility issues?
That's another great question. So, and it's a complex one. So, the New South Wales government is funding numerous projects, including lifts, under the Transport Access Program. That is completely separate to the Anti-Discrimination Act. The Federal Disability Act, which is under the Australian Human Rights Commission, requires all government departments to develop disability inclusion plans. But the Transport for New South Wales Disability Inclusion Plan actually details the progress on this, and the aim is to make all stations accessible. That doesn't necessarily mean all will have lifts, but is to make them accessible. But the plan work has been delayed due to expenses and the difficult layout of some stations. In saying that, it's important to remember people can still make a complaint to Anti-Discrimination New South Wales, as disability discrimination in terms of accessing goods and services are covered under the Act, under the Anti-Discrimination Act.
Thank you, Claire. Now I'll turn to questions that we've received during your presentation.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm just trying to enlarge the screen. Does sex discrimination as a ground include discrimination based on a person's criminal history being on the sex offender list?
So that would, a criminal history isn't necessarily covered under the Anti-Discrimination Act. You would talk to the Australian Human Rights Commission regarding being treated unfairly because of your criminal history. So that would be the agency that you would talk to with regarding that. So the Australian Human Rights Commission has broader legislation that covers criminal history issues.
Thank you. What would be the reason, you may have sort of covered that in your last answer, but what would be the reason for approaching the Australian Human Rights Commission as opposed to the local state anti-discrimination agency?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And we would suggest that you ring both agencies and have a chat about to the inquiry services and ask them, you know, how the process works and so forth, and make a decision on who you want to complain to. It's really important. There are some differences. For example, there's a 6-month window to make a complaint to the Australian Human Rights Commission and a 12-month window. There are some differences, but ring us, both agencies, have a chat and make a decision. And sometimes as individual agencies, our inquiry officers will say you're better off going to this organisation, or it's out. We'll give you referral advice when you ring the inquiry services. So that's a really good question.
Thank you. The next question is, are the outcomes of conciliation binding on the parties?
It's not a court. And so the decisions are not binding. So if it does go to the tribunal, if it's not resolved through conciliation and it goes to the NCAT, which is the tribunal, the results are binding, but not in the conciliation process.
Another question is, in terms of Anti-Discrimination New South Wales website, is there an easy read page explaining processes and access to legal support for people with intellectual or cognitive barriers or concerns?
Yes, there is, and I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier. Yes, there is an easy read materials on the website.
That's great. There's a comment and question here. Since COVID, many services have moved to online. Is this discrimination if a person is unable to use or access technology?
Yeah, look, it's not necessarily discrimination unless there may be, and I do understand your frustration, and it's not just, we're dealing with people talking to us about not only disability discrimination, for example, age discrimination with regard to this. If you're able to contact the agency and we're able to assist you, for example, if you can't be involved in a conciliation that is online with MS Teams and so forth, we're now almost ready to go back with some face-to-face. We used to do a lot of outreach, so travel around to do conciliations before COVID. So if you talk to our agency about what your disability is and what your needs are, we should be able to provide something which will be able to assist. If an agency doesn't make reasonable adjustments, basically, for whatever information you require, then that may be discrimination. But again, talk to our inquiry service about if you have an issue about a service and what they do or don't provide.
The next question is, it's sort of a policy question. Do you think the New South Wales anti-discrimination legislation should include a positive duty on employers, educators, government to eliminate discrimination? For example, should we have a similar positive duty as that posed under the Victorian Equal Opportunity Act?
Yeah, so that's something I really can't comment on as I'm an employee of Anti-Discrimination New South Wales. I suppose it's something to talk to your local state member about. There have been conversations about making changes, to the Act over the years. And obviously there are acts, for example, the Victorian legislation, which has been vastly adjusted. There are acts which have been changed a great deal more than our Act, and it's not something that as an employee I can comment on, but it's something to talk to your state member about.
Thank you, Claire. Someone else has said, expense is a factor for many of our clients. What costs are involved in the complaints process? You have indicated that during the webinar that Anti-Discrimination New South Wales services are free,
Yeah.
but they've also asked if the matter goes to NCAT.
Yeah, so if the matter does go to NCAT, you may need to pay costs of a solicitor if you choose to have one, but we would refer a client to a disability legal service where you'd be able to get advice about solicitors and so forth. And sometimes some of our clients are able to get, by accessing legal centres, are able to get pro bono, so free lawyers. But it's dependent on the case.
It might also be good to make that inquiry with NCAT as well about their costs and processes.
Yeah.
There's another question which is quite specific, and I think that it's more in line of a request for advice. So I won't. I will forward that to Anti-Discrimination New South Wales following the webinar for a more direct response in relation to that. And there's just been a comment about difficulty finding the easy to read link. So I will liaise with Claire and will provide some information about resources.
Yeah, and it may be because we did have an organisation reviewing them, so they may have just been taken down temporarily while they're being reviewed. So I will check on that for you and get back to you straight away.
That's fabulous. So it looks like they're all the questions that have come through to this point. I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Claire, for the presentation today and making yourself available. And a big thank you to the audience who've joined us today. And also in the email that you received, you would have the email address for cele@legalaid.nsw.gov.au. And if any further questions or queries arise, feel free to send us an email. We do respond to those emails that we receive. And also Legal Aid New South Wales has a publication called the Discrimination Toolkit, and we revised that in the last 12 months. And we did that in conjunction with Anti-Discrimination New South Wales, the Australian Human Rights Commission, NCAT, and the Federal Court of Australia and the Federal Circuit Court and Family Court of Australia. So that publication can be downloaded, an e-version can be downloaded from the Legal Aid website, and you can also order from our publications page on the website a hard copy for yourself, which it provides possibly a lot more detail than what Claire has been able to provide in the presentation today. And when I send a follow-up email, I'll include links to where you can find that information. And of course, Claire, Anti-Discrimination New South Wales has some fabulous fact sheets and resources on your website as well.
Yes, we do, and I encourage you to access those, and also to ring the inquiry service if you would like, prefer to have a chat to somebody about your discrimination matter.
There's just one last question come in. If someone needs to go to NCAT, the Australian Centre for Disability Law, I'm not sure if the person is asking if there's lawyers or if you can have a lawyer in NCAT. From my experience in NCAT, you can have legal representation with the permission of the member who is hearing the matter, and it's just a matter of seeking approval to have representation. I'm not sure that Claire can answer whether the Australian Centre for Disability Law has lawyers that can provide representation. It might be best to direct that query to that organisation.
Yeah, I agree.
So once again, thank you, Claire, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And we'll send those resources that we've referred to in an email to everyone who registered for today's webinar. The webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded onto the Legal Aid YouTube channel if you'd like to view it again later. Thanks everybody, and I'll close off the webinar now.
Thank you.